Most people seem to be mind-boggled that in a time when we're worried about food shortages due to the conflict in Ukraine, and we saw just how delicate international supply chains are due to the pandemic, why is it that in the Netherlands, people are being made to be more reliant on supply chains as well as having its farms and food production shut down? And in order to understand this, you have to understand how the European Union thinks. Unlike the United States or other nations in the world, which have been created due to the will of the people who have fought and bled for the creations of their nation state, the European Union was created top down as a concept. And it was sold in a very disingenuous way to people. You see, initially it was just a trade agreement. And the people who said that the trade agreement is going to turn into a federal state were called conspiracy theorists. But as time moves on, the European Union has indeed solidified more and more power. It has taken more and more from the people and gave it to the bureaucrats. And as such, now you are in the position where the European Union de facto exists as a superstate, and it wants to consolidate its power over the masses. And in order to do this, it has to erase every notion of nationalism, and by doing so, it has to remove the abilities of various nation states to resist. And in the case of Netherlands, by forcing this country to be more reliant on international supply chains, you're making the country less likely to oppose the European Union. You see, Germany is in a similar situation right now where they are dependent on Russian gas and they can't have whatever internal politics they want. They still need to take gas from Russians, and as such, you can see the damage that is being taken to their sovereignty when you are reliant on international supply chains. And this is exactly what the European Union wants to do with the Netherlands. They don't want them to make their own food. They want to import their food from somewhere else so that they can be at the whims of whomever they're going to have to import the food from. Another win that the European Union can gain from this is remove even other traces of nationalism. You see, some of the most nationalistic people in every country in Europe happens to be the farmers. The farmers, they are usually sedentary people who have sat there on that land for generations, and they have a deep ingrained culture and a love for their country. As such, if you manage to get rid of these people, then you solve a big problem that the European Union has, which is that of nationalism. The way that the European Union can do this is a tactic that the Soviet Union has employed when getting new territories to vote for communism. You see, this happened in Moldavia, it happened in Ukraine, where Stalin has displaced a big chunk of the population from within these countries and moved them to Siberia, and instead with loyal Russians. And you can see the results years later. Most of Ukraine right now is anti-Russian. But as you move to the Donbas era, where most of these displacement happened, and we're not talking about one or two people, we're talking about tens of millions of people, you can see that the Donbas area is pro-Russian. The same thing with Moldavia and Transnistria. Like, these parts are pro-Russian because of the politics that Stalin had. So this is what the European Union wants. This is why the European Union pushes for massive migration into the Netherlands. The problem is that when you push for many people to go into the Netherlands, you also have to construct apartment buildings. You also have to construct the places where these people are going to stay. By removing the farms, by shutting down the farmland, you now have places for these buildings to be erected. Now, they're not saying this openly. However, you get to see certain viral videos on Twitter with politicians from the Netherlands pointing to a farm and saying, well, this in the future is going to be a shopping center and it's going to house many families. They're talking about immigrant families that are going to be imported into the Netherlands, and they need that space. By dislocating the farmers, they obtain two of these goals. They remove some of that nationalism. Hopefully those farmers are going to go away some other place. And instead, you're going to have these sprawling tenant buildings where you're going to house, I guess, like the new Dutch. So when you understand these things, all of the other policies make sense. This is why the Dutch politicians aren't interested in negotiating with the farmers. This is why they are completely cut off from the discussion. It's because the government is not looking for a solution. The problem isn't environmental. The problem is that they want the European Union to gain more power over the Netherlands by weakening its sovereignty, by weakening its ability to produce food, by weakening its economy, by preventing it from exporting its food. I mean, billions of dollars flow into the Netherlands every single year because of its food production. And they are going to make sure that they're going to put an end to that. I can prove to you that this is not about the environment. You see, the reasoning is that they want to lower the emissions of nitrogen. Okay, fine, but like when you bring immigrants in, you increase the number of people that are within Netherlands, especially when you bring millions of people in. Isn't that going to increase the emissions of nitrogen? Like, won't those people still have to eat? So isn't it still going to cause the emissions to go up? And the answer is yes. Why will they do it? Because it's not about nitrogen. Now, nitrogen is interesting because right now everyone talks about carbon and people are like, oh, well, the global warming carbon, so what does nitrogen have to do with it? Well, a couple of decades ago, the European Union decided that it's the duty of the Dutch people to protect certain species of plants. I believe the document was called Natura. So, is this document that the Netherlands politicians signed, which guaranteed that they're going to defend certain species of musk and some type of wheat, among other type of vegetation. Now, this vegetation, in order to grow, requires a certain level of nitrogen. So, if the level of nitrogen increases, you're going to have less of that musk, but you're going to have different other species of trees and plants. So, they're violating this contract from Brussels. Now, any normal politician that actually cares about its country and genuinely doesn't want its people to starve or suffer this level of hardship would just withdraw from the deal and suffer whatever penalty there is. They would say, look, European Union, we are no longer committed to supporting this type of plant because it is unsustainable for us, right? Our farmers are unable to keep their land if we keep doing this. So just take whatever punishment it is. It's probably not going to be a penalty as big as shutting down so many farmers and destroying your nation's agricultural economy. But the people in power, they're more like the stewards for the European Union. And it's also due to the fact that a lot of people are misinformed. They don't know what they voted for. For example, in the European Union, there has been a green wave. This is how they called the last elections. Now, when you talk with an actual German person and you ask them, it's like, okay, who did you vote for? And they will be like, well, I voted for the Green Party. And you'd be like, well, so you voted for these policies? They're like, no, I'm with the trees and stuff. I just want more trees. And I'm like, no, but like you voted for these policies. What are you talking about? Well, look on their website. Like they're actively saying that they want to shut down this and that. And they're like, oh, wow, really? I voted for that? Yes! Because most people, when they think about greens, they think about the greens from the 80s or the 90s that were about protecting the forest and making sure that there's a lot of trees. Modern day greens aren't about that, okay? Like modern day greens are making gas inaccessible for people. They want to make commercials flight inaccessible for people. They want people to eat the bugs, right? Like shut down cow farms, and that's what you're voting for. You're not voting for what you think because, again, like the green movement has completely shifted. When I grew up, buying a paper bag was considered anti-environment because you're killing trees. So you needed to buy a plastic bag. Now it's the opposite and it's still the same fucking green movement. No wonder people are being confused. So now you understand why the politicians are so against the Dutch farmers. Now you understand why there are protests in Italy and there's protests in Sri Lanka and there's protests in other places. It's because this is organized. The European Union wants to weaken its nation state, wants to destroy the concept of nationality. In other words, they don't want the German to be loyal to Germany. They want the German to be loyal to the European Union. So the only way they can do that is using these types of tactics. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the comment section. Take care.